Hi guys! Today I'm going to give you a quick guide on essay writing. This is a last minute reminder and a quick summary of what essay writing is all about. Okay, first, before you even begin on your introduction, the most important thing you need to do is to study the question first. Okay, as you study the question, underline the keywords and identify what are the things and elements that the question wants you to write about. So for example, I've given you here a sample question, alright? This is taken from last year's session 1 question, 2020 question. It says here, our positive attitude towards health is influenced by the way we were brought up. Do you agree or disagree? So here, you have to identify 3 elements. Usually there are 3 elements inside a question. The first one that we can identify from here is our positive attitude. This is also recognized as the subject of the question. Alright? And then over here, you need to find out what is the issue that is happening to the subject of the question. So, before that, our positive attitude, not finished, towards health. And then the issue here talks about being influenced. Alright, so this is the issue. And then finally, you need to find out what's the object. First, you find out the subject that is affected by the issue, and the issue is the object over here, the way that we were brought up. Okay, so 3 things. These are the 3 important things that you need to talk about throughout your whole essay. Alright, so once you have understood the question, the next thing that you need to do is to determine your stand. So first, do you agree or not? If you agree, then talk about how your agreement supports this issue. Alright, so your points will talk about how, the ways that actually support this issue. So for example, the issue here is that the positive attitude towards health is influenced by how we were brought up. So if let's say you agree, how does this positive attitude being influenced by this way that we were brought up? How? Alright, so this is the key question here. If you disagree, then you need to talk about how it does not support this issue here. So how is it that it is not being influenced? Alright, so what are the other ways that were influenced by this issue? And then finally, if you partially agree, how you have both it supports and does not support the issue. Okay, but I don't actually recommend you to do partially agree if possible, because if you do partially agree, what I'm afraid is that sometimes your points for agree and disagree may actually contradict each other. So it's better if you stick to one. Either all 3 points agree or all 3 points disagree. Unless if you really have no idea to have 3 points which states the same stand, then only you go for partially agree. Otherwise, just try to stick to one stand in order that it will be strong, so that the whole essay will be stronger, alright? It takes one stand. Okay, so how do you do the introduction? First, you start off with a hook. This one I've taught you before already, alright? You can start with a definition, give a definition of some kind of the keyword. So again, coming back to the question, earlier the question talks about positive attitudes, alright, and influence and brought up. So take the keyword from the question and then talk about positive attitudes, and talk about health, alright. Give a definition of what positive attitudes are, alright, and what health is, alright. Alright, or you can start with some kind of current news talking about health and attitudes. These 2 things, remember, don't just talk about health. If you only talk about health, that's it, gone. You've only talked about one keyword. If you talk about positive attitudes only also, that's it. You need to talk about both the positive attitudes and about health, alright? Or you can start with a proverb as well, something that has to do with health or positive attitudes, or a quotation, or an anecdote. Anecdote means a short story of maybe some thing that you have heard from a neighbor or from a friend about attitudes and health, or some kind of surprising facts, or anything that arouses the curiosity of the reader, okay, about health or positive attitudes, or a joke. All right, something that can hook and grab the attention of the reader. And then after that, expand that keyword. So if let's say you were talking about positive attitudes and health, right? Then, so this will be your first line, okay? Then your second line, expand the keyword from that sentence itself. So you have here talking about positive attitudes and how health is important. Let's say, for example, your first line, you say important. Then take the word important and narrow it down to why is it important. Okay? And then because the question, coming back to the question earlier, the question talks about your upbringing. Then you have to bring this inside your sentence as well, your introduction. So narrow it down further and then link it. Link it to the issue or the object of the question which was talking about upbringing. All right. Okay, so you relate it to upbringing. So you keep narrowing it down. And then finally, put your stand. So for this second bullet here, expanding on the keyword and narrowing it down, this one can take about 2 or 3 sentences. Or you can even go up to 4 sentences. It's up to you how much you want to talk about in order for you to narrow down this your introduction. So I've written over here, in the first sentence, give something that is general first. All right, then you move on to something that is specific and it becomes more and more specific, about 2 to 3 sentences here. The general one, just about 1 sentence. Then after that, you have your next sentence, maybe your sentence number 5. This will be your stand. Okay, 2 or 3 or maybe 4 sentences. And then after that, you finally have your thesis statement. So for those of you who have forgotten, a thesis statement is 1 sentence that contains all your 3 main points. Okay, so for example, in your thesis statement, you write there, you do agree that positive attitudes towards health are influenced by a person's upbringing. Because, then your first point, comma, second point, and then your final point. All right, so this thesis statement is very, very important. It will actually frame your whole essay and it gives the reader an idea of what to expect of your points in the following paragraphs. All right, so this is your introduction, just about 5 or 6 lines. It doesn't have to be very long. Okay, so looking at this over here, I've drawn here what I call the funnel method. Always start with something that is very general first, take it from the keywords of the question, and then narrow it down to something that is specific, again, based on the keyword from your general statement. All right, and in this specific sentence or sentences, link it. This is very important. Link it to the question, the issue of the question, and the object of the question. Most importantly, link to the issue. And then narrow it down again to your stand, and then finally down to your thesis statement, which contains all the 3 points. Okay, the funnel method. Next is the body. So for body, I always like to encourage my students to use this, what I call a structured questioning model. And in this model, you have all these questions which are aimed at helping you to think of ideas of what to write for your sentence. So for the body, you only need 3 paragraphs. And the tip, this model that I have over here is to help you to frame your ideas in 1 paragraph, and you do the same for all the other 3 paragraphs. So let's look at how you want to structure the paragraph for the first point, all right, which we will call body 1. So for example, you have your topic sentence, your main point. This is your main point here. You can just write it over here. All right, so this acts as your draft. All right, so after writing your main point over here, there are 3 things which I always encourage my students to look at, which is first, what you mean. Okay, what do you mean by this main point over here? This is the first thing. All right, and then why do you say so? And then how does it work? And this how here refers to examples. specific examples that support what you mean in this topic sentence. And after you have finished with all these three, then in the final part of the topic sentence, you give the impact or the effect. So what? And then finally, the mini conclusion, which is very important because it wraps up what you are trying to say in relation to the question. Alright, so in order to make sure that your points do not run from what the question is asking you, always wrap up with a mini conclusion. You can say, therefore, by doing this, or therefore, because of this, it helps. So you can say, therefore, because of this, positive attitudes towards health really do get influenced by the way the way a person is brought up. Okay, something like that. All right. So, for example, you have your first sub point here. So this will be your first sentence, and then you can elaborate and give some reasons. This will be your second sentence. All right. Maybe you don't have to go into specific examples yet. If you want to, you can also. This will be your third sentence, and then after that, you can give another sub point. All right. Fourth sentence, and then some reasons for it. Fifth sentence, another example over here if you can. You don't have to give the third sub point if you have no more idea, but if you still have ideas for it, then you can give up to maybe 7 or 8 sentences just to explain what you mean by your main point over here. Then after that, give one more sentence talking about the impact or effect or how everything relates to one another, and then your final sentence, a mini conclusion. Alright, if you gave another third sub point, then it'll be about 10 sentences altogether. And I think that's just nice and enough for a paragraph to explain what your first point or your second point or your third point is all about. Okay, let me just show you an example over here. So coming back to the question, this is the subject of the question. Alright, positive attitudes. This is the issue here, influenced by, this is the object. Okay, influenced by this. This is object. Okay, so let's look at an example here. So for example, if you agree that positive attitude towards health is influence. So how? Remember earlier I told you, in order to get your point will be, if you agree, how do you agree? How do you agree? So you agree by saying that yes, it is influenced by the way you're brought up through role modeling by parents. Alright, so this is your first point. Alright, so what do you mean by role modeling? So you need to explain the keyword on role modeling. So here, what you mean is that children follow healthy lifestyle habits from the parents. This can be your first sub point. Alright, and why do you say that? Because they were influenced and taught from young when they grew up with their parents, and then they watch their parents every day. They imitate. Your second sub point could be, then they imitate the way parents do things. Alright, so how do they do that? What are the specific examples? By healthy eating, by exercise. Alright, do take note that you can actually rearrange all these things in any way you want. You don't have to talk about what you mean first and then why and then only how. Alright, it depends on how you structure your paragraph, as long as these questions guide you in order to make your paragraph richer. If you only give what without a why, then your paragraph may not be deep, not be deep enough in terms of depth and meaning. So after talking about all these things and explaining about what you mean by role modeling, why and how is it that our positive attitudes towards health are role modeled by parents, then talk about the impact or the effect of it. Therefore, our attitudes towards health depend on how parents show us as role models. And then finally, your mini conclusion. Hence, the positive attitude towards health is influenced by the way we are brought up. Just a wrap up, okay? And you can see over here, this is actually almost the same as the question up here. Positive attitudes towards health is the same. It's influenced by the way we were brought up. Then this was actually your first point here, due to role modeling by parents. Okay, this, if you do not have a so here, it's okay. You can actually combine these two. As long as, it depends on the question actually, but as long as you talk a bit about what's the impact or effect of this, which is actually this one. Influence the way we are brought up. It depends on the question. Sometimes in some questions you can talk about the impact or the effect. Sometimes in some questions you can't. Okay, so if you see over here, you can have here this as your first sentence. All right, maybe this is your second sentence. You have your third sentence here, your fourth sentence, fifth sentence. All right, and then maybe your sixth sentence, and which I say you can interchange. Then after that maybe 7 and 8. Just about that. Just about 8 sentences is enough for the question. Okay? Alright. Then finally, for your conclusion, restate your stand and your thesis statement. So, always start by saying, in conclusion, I therefore agree that, agree with what? Again, the question, going back to the question. So, that will be your first sentence. And then, restate your thesis statement again. So earlier in your thesis statement, maybe you mentioned that you agree that our positive attitudes towards health were influenced by the way we were brought up, right? Because your first sentence, your second sentence, first point, second point, and then your third point. Again, try to rephrase it if possible, so that this will be able to give you more marks for language. Okay, then in your third sentence, give some kind of a solution or a recommendation or a suggestion, something that people can do, or recommend them to take some kind of action based on this. All right. If it's not suitable for the question, like in this case, maybe we can recommend that, therefore, this is a very important an important value that you like to instill, and it should be done since young, something like that. Then finally, coming here, a wrap up, a general statement again about what this topic and issue is about. So earlier you started off with a general statement which was about the positive attitudes and health, and then you come back again to another general statement about positive attitudes and health and upbringing. So it will be like an inverse funnel already. Alright, so you have here going back to a general one. So you restated your thesis statement and then your stand, okay, and then you give some kind of suggestion or recommendation, and then you go back to a general one, and that wraps up everything nicely. Okay, so I hope you're able to follow. These are just very quick reminders to all of you in order to organize your essay well, so that it is more coherent and more cohesive. Okay, alright, so that's all. I wish you all the best. See you next time.